ask you, Dr. Mahipala, to make your presentation on the topic is Reconciliation and Peace, Ministry of Health impacts.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Ruberu, Co-Chairman, all the distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to be here, stand before you today to speak to you on a very important subject, Reconciliation and Peace, Ministry of Health impact. Let me, at the outset, extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to share some of my views and thoughts about one of the very important subject which is also close to my heart, and I am emotionally involved in provision of healthcare services in the northern province. So I am very much like to talk to you on this subject. Of course, I thought that there are foreign guests, so that's why I thought I will introduce Sri Lanka, but I think there's no need. Now, Sri Lanka, we have a pluralistic kind of health system, and we have indigenous or native system which has been there for more than 2,500 years. It was from the 4th century BC, I'm talking about BCs. And then of course we have Ayurveda system which has been introduced to Sri Lanka with the introduction of Buddhism in 3rd century BC from India. And at that time, of course, Buddhist monks were used to preach the religion as well as treat patients with Ayurveda treatment. And then of course with the invasion of Sri Lanka by Portuguese, the allopathic system was introduced and the first hospital was built in Sri Lanka in 1552. Now, just remind you about the distant past. As I said, even in 4th century BC, there were some focus on healthcare, especially about sanitation. There were people recruited about looking after the sanitary aspects. And like public health inspectors now, there was a person called Nagara Guttika who was appointed by the king that time, recruited to look after the sanitation. And there's enough archaeological evidence to say, there are evidence to say that even at that time, we were focused attention about sanitation. And then of course, recent past, as I said, the first hospital was built in 1552 by Portuguese. And then of course, we were invaded by Dutch people, and the first asylum was built. As you all know, hospital didn't have much function at those days because there was no medication, and antibiotics and drugs were evaluated later. So therefore, the asylums were built to segregate people, especially who were suffering from communicable diseases, and they were institutionalized. And such institution was built in Sri Lanka in 1708, which was known as Leper Asylum, and still it is functioning as a hospital. We have few patients there. It may be the oldest functioning hospital, leprosy hospital in the world. And thereafter, of course, British were taken measures to establish a civil medical department and of course develop the health services in Sri Lanka. And this is a photograph of an ancient hospital during a very ancient time. And then of course, under the British rule, the legislation was enacted to ensure the quarantine services, quarantine of people, mandatory vaccination, ensuring sanitation, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into detail because my time is limited. But of course, they were able to establish the legal framework in this country. And I remember when I presented this sometimes back in Harvard University, the deputy DG from South Africa was there. And he said Britishers were very kind to Sri Lankans, but not to South Africans, because they didn't have any of these systems established there. Then, of course, as usual, of course, we were able to set up various preventive programs, anti-malaria campaign, VD campaign, and amalgamation of curative and preventive healthcare services. As you all know, you may be as medical students familiar with the Alma Ata Conference in 1978, but well before that, in 1926, we were able to establish the primary healthcare unit in the first time in the history. So we were able to develop the public health services very strongly in those days. And then, of course, intervention for vaccine preventable diseases. As I said, we have an ordinance which was made smallpox vaccination mandatory, and it's a disease which had been eradicated from this globe in 1977. And last case of smallpox was reported in Sri Lanka in 1967, 10 years before the last case reported in Somalia. And then, of course, it was eradicated from the globe. And then, of course, we have introduced various vaccines. And 1990, we became the first country in the Asia to achieve universal coverage. Now, why I place all these evidence, just to tell you that we had a very good health system in the past, distant past. We had the very good health system in the recent past, and at present as well, we have the best health system in the Southeast Asia region. So, government or the king was made responsible to look after the health of the people. Now, we have a devolved system in Sri Lanka as far as administration is concerned, and it is health is also being subjected to that. We have the Central Ministry of Health, which is mainly looking after the policies and basic training. Then, of course, we have provincial councils where political power is being devolved, and we have the provincial director of health services and regional director at the district level who provide the services. And there are two characters which I would like to, pay a little bit of attention. Now, Sri Lankan health system, we have gone beyond the institutions. That is one of the unique feature there. Most of the countries, they have health system where people come to an institution to get the care, to seek the care. But here, of course, two prominent features, public health midwives and public health inspectors. Now, midwives goes house by house to provide the domiciliary care, ANC, and also MCH. And public health inspector go house by house to provide the sanitation. So this is a unique feature in Sri Lankan health system. And as you know, in 2004 December, tsunami wave hit Sri Lanka, and most of the areas, coastal areas were disturbed and destroyed. And suddenly, within a matter of a few hours, we had 35,000 deaths and few thousand casualties and few hundred thousand displaced people. And but of course, we were able to look after the health aspect of them without having any outbreak situation. And again, that is, of course, because of the dedication and commitment of the healthcare staff who involved with that. And now this has set the platform to the government of Sri Lanka to establish a separate cabinet portfolio, which is the Ministry of Disaster Management. And through a Parliament Act, Disaster Management Center was established to look after if such disasters occur. And in parallel to that, Ministry of Health, we have taken measures to establish a Disaster Management Center, which was functioning in those days 24 hours round the clock, 7 days a week. And even now we have this center functioning during the daytime, but the moment we have emergency or disaster, we start it function throughout the day, which manage the disaster situations. And conflicts and health, of course, very well known. I need not to explain this in detail, though it's look complicated, it's very straightforward, and war situation, health of the people is very well affected due to direct causes or due to some indirect causes. Now, peace and reconciliation is two subjects today we are dealing with. And peace is the result of perfect balance between the systems within a country, allowing all the people of the nation to benefit from full enjoyment of their right. And broader sense, reconciliation means coming together, bringing people together. Now, reconciliation historically is a word which has not been used much in other sectors, but predominantly used in the banking sector. They say bank reconciliations. And of course, it has been later used by the finance people, and then of course Catholic Church, but now it is used very broadly in after conflict situations. Now, Nelson Mandela is a legendary in our era. He is one of the person who has involved much in peace and reconciliation, and he has wrote a book that is his autobiography known as Long March Long Walk to Freedom, and there he stated, I quote, "True reconciliation does not consist in merely forgetting the past." And he meant it has to go beyond that. It is, of course, establishment of dialogue, diplomacy, good conversation, achievement of harmony, and more than that, development. So he has quoted it very well. Now, there have been many studies done all over the world, and it was recognized that in transforming societies after conflict situations, there are few important elements to be think about. One is ensuring economic growth, very important, democracy, then again ensuring good governance, and then the health. Health is a very important means of achieving peace. Why health? It is interesting to look into why health is so much important. There are three reasons. One is altruism, other one is objectivity, and then the legitimacy. What is altruism? Now, healthcare professionals, when they engage in provision of healthcare services, they have not selfishness, no ulterior motive involved. It is without any prejudice. So fairness is there when the health professionals are involved in provision of care. Objectivity, again, we don't go by any emotions. We go by the empirical and scientific evidence and treat the patient. And thirdly, legitimacy. Now, healthcare professionals and workers have been earned high degree of credibility. So people believe them, people trust them. So because of these three reasons, health is been considered as a mean or way to establish peace and reconciliation. Now, as I said, health initiatives may effectively used to prevent conflict, reduce the level of morbidity and mortality in conflict situation, promote post-war reconciliation, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into detail. Now, there's an initiative taken by World Health Organization in 1981, which is known as HBP.